Hi, I'm Sam, and this is Retro Reads. And today, I figured I'd go over some of my favorite sci-fi series slash standalones. So I made my first booktube video, and some of you were nice enough, to respond in comments and say that, you were interested in reading more sci-fi. So I figured that, I might start with some recommendations of stuff I've already read that I really like. So first off, I mentioned this last time, but it's worth bringing up again. But all of Becky Chambers' books are fantastic. So my favorite one is A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. But that is in a series of 4 called the Wayfarers series, these 4. And they're all fun. Definitely the first one's my favorite, and then I think the second one, then the 4th one, and then the 3rd. But, if you like cool aliens, fun adventures, it's a good ride. But yeah, I just fell in love with A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and it's my all-time favorite, so I had to start here. But I also just love other works by Becky Chambers. If you kind of want just like a taste of what Becky's like sci-fi style is like, this novella, To Be Taught If Fortunate, is really fun. It's like a cool kind of exploration into the life of a scientist on a space mission, right? So kind of a little more nuance in, the day-to-day, like doing experiments, what they're interested in. But it's a short read, so it's really fun. The other shorter books are these Robot and Monk books. So there's 2 of them, A Psalm for the Wild Built, the first one, and A Prayer for the Crown Shy. And these are both very cute. They definitely fit into like the cozy sci-fi, which is, at least for me, a newer genre. A subgenre I haven't really explored that much. But I really like them. And it's just about this little, a robot and a tea monk. And so in this future society, robots have become sentient, and now they live away from humans. And so this tea monk is exploring, kind of pondering his life and why he's choosing to be a tea monk, and is that his passion anymore. And he ends up in the wild where the robots reign, and he meets this robot who wants to learn more about human society because they've been separated for so long. And so it's a really fun story just about kind of these 2 characters and learning about each other and about each other's societies, and finding, commonalities. But it's very cute. And again, they're very short. I think these are like, I listen to audiobooks, so obviously like physical books, if they look too big, they just scare me. But when I see a book that's this size at a bookstore, it feels very inviting. So I've already gifted A Psalm for the Wild Built to a couple friends just because I feel like it's a really nice, cozy read. Also, my husband was nice enough to get me a signed copy for a present, so I really cherish that. So yeah, definitely Becky Chambers is like my favorite of all time for science fiction. But obviously I still have a lot to read. So part of this YouTube series is I want to try more science fiction and then see if I have new favorites. So I'm also excited that this is kind of like documenting where I'm starting in my love of sci-fi. And then, maybe in a year or 2, we'll see, have these stood the test? Have they been, is A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet still my favorite, or has it been dethroned? But we shall see. So yes, Becky Chambers, huge fan. It's going to be hard to put these all back. So another series, or it's not really a series, another author I like is Blake Crouch. And honestly, I'm kind of giving you guys the list of the books that I decide to get for my dad as a present, because he also likes sci-fi. But, he's, read all the classics. Like, he's a huge Dune fan, huge Asimov, huge, like, he got me all the Heinleins on the shelf right here. Like, really, really Orson Scott Card. Like, he loves all the classics. And so part of like the fun of me reading more sci-fi too is that I've been trying to find books that I'm like, oh, he would like this. So I've been getting them for him as like, Christmas gifts. And one of the more recent ones I gave him was, where is it? There's so many books. It's hard to find. And I'm also bad at, it's all alphabetized, but I'm bad at looking through the alphabet without singing it. So these books by Blake Crouch, oh wait, I have another one. So yeah, right now I have a shelf problem. I don't have a book problem. I have lots of books and I love buying books, but I don't have enough shelves to fit them. So you can see there's white space to this side where the shelves I just bought should hopefully go and allow me to actually spread out the Sci-Fi because I have been using my husband's office to store the extra books I bought this year that I don't have space for. So Blake Crouch. I just like stumbled upon this author. I was looking for, fun sci-fi. And the first one I read was Dark Matter, which is like a thriller, kind of, It's about this guy who ends up in a different universe parallel to his own. Or like he sees someone who takes over his personality and he, stumbles upon the fact that there are these parallel universes and figuring out like what would his life have been like? What would his life have been like in different circumstances? Is he happy with the path he chose? Fighting back to try to, go to his reality. So that's really cool. But the second one I read is my favorite of Blake Crouch's, which is Recursion. And oh my God, I love multiple points of view. Especially when they're characters that I can, like, just by hearing them talk, know exactly who they are. And this book does that. There's 2 main points of view. And they also are in different timelines. And the timelines end up converging. But the main kind of basis of the plot is that there's one scientist you're following, and she's looking into basically time travel. And the other character is someone who's just kind of living a normal life at the beginning. And then you see how their lives intertwine. And basically they're trying to save the world from itself. This woman creating this amazing technology, but if people abuse it, how do they actually make it so that the world doesn't kill itself? And so it's, really interesting. The weaving stories are really fun to read, and you kind of are going back and forth and you don't know which one you'd rather live in, for the next chapter. But yeah, it was really good. I don't think my dad's read this yet, but I bought him this book. So hopefully he will soon. But, and then the latest one that I read was Upgrade. I read this with my husband. He was reading it to me for a while, and then we listened to the audiobook. But I also like this one, I think because it took so long for us to read it together that I kind of missed it. it took months because he was physically reading it to me like at night if we had time, but then we would forget about it. So this one didn't hit as hard for me, but maybe I should reread it sometime when I'm a little more focused. But yeah, it's about like gene therapy, sort of like, could you genetically change people to make them like the optimal human in this world where a lot of people, like, there's whole groups of like people trying to protect, the human genome from being messed with. But yeah, overall, I really like Blake Crouch. Another author that if I see another book by them, I'll probably just read it. But they also have a series called The Wayward Pines, and that's pretty fun. I think it's sci-fi. Yeah, it's like kind of Twin Peaksy. Like this guy ends up in this weird town and he doesn't know, he kind of just drove through it and he never leaves. And then everyone's very like Stepford Wives, like super, like everything's perfect all the time. Nothing's wrong. Don't talk about how things are wrong because you'd never, we're not supposed to talk about that. And he's trying to figure out, how did he get here? Where is he? What's going on? And that's fun too. There's 3 of those, I think. I've read all of them. Those were good. So yeah, Blake Crouch, huge recommendation. Another series, I'm not taking these down because they're too big. The Expanse is really great. I think that, I started watching the show first and I really liked the show. And then I decided to listen to all the audiobooks. And I just fell in love with the characters even more. I think the show does a great job, but I love the characters even more in the books. There's also a character, wow, it's been like years since I read these, but I think her name's Sam, which is why I probably liked her, but she had like red hair. I think she was gay, and she like was another mechanic, and I am always drawn towards the engineers. It doesn't matter like what story it is, but if there's a nerd, that's gonna be my favorite character normally in like books or TV or movies or whatever. So I remember really liking her, and I was really sad that they didn't put her in the show because she was awesome and badass. But I also like Naomi and Drummer. Those are like my 3 favorite characters, but I like Naomi more in the book than in the show. But yeah, The Expanse, if you haven't heard of it, I know it's like a little more popular. It's basically like you're following this smaller ship called the Rocinante and a crew that's kind of working towards helping this society because right now the Earth and Mars, and then people who live in between are called belters. Those kind of three groups are fighting for resources and for power. And so there's kind of, an element of like, societal, you know, diplomacy and war and kind of, figuring out how does everyone get the resources they need and be treated, fairly. But you find this kind of ragtag team who ends up playing a huge role because there's this like weird unknown alien species that comes into the mix that can basically like infect people. And so how do do they protect their society against this alien threat and emerging technologies they get from that alien threat, but also kind of following, again, just like this personal team. I tend to like stories that have, like a core family element, a found family, whoever those people are, who end up working together and would like, die for each other. I love those kind of stories. So yeah, Expanse, it's a really long series. So that's great. Like if you love reading, then, you could, read one every couple months and, you have a lot of fuel for many years. But yeah, that's such a great series. Next, I'll go because it's right next to it. Ready Player One and Ready Player Two by Ernest Cline. So again, this also made a movie, but the movie wasn't as good. But I read this book. I like clearly remember reading Ready Player One when I was in undergrad, and I was like in the midst of, I usually read nonfiction, space history books. And somehow this got on my radar. I'm a huge 80s nerd. I was like in middle school and high school, like my yearbook photos are me in like leopard print dresses with like shoulder pads and like giant like neon earrings. Like I think I was born in the wrong decade. In fact, my husband and I collect vintage arcade machines. And we have another channel called Robotics where we have videos about that, but like we have 25 full vintage arcade machines in our house. We have like our own arcade. So like I love the 80s. And so I really enjoyed this book because Ready Player One is so full of little like Easter eggs of, fun 80s references from movies, from video games, from everything pop culture. So I really enjoyed reading this book. And again, it's about just like a character who he lives in kind of these stacks, so more like urban environment. And the only way he's really like enjoying his life or living is in this virtual reality. And the creator of this virtual reality makes a challenge that whoever can complete these challenges gets basically his inheritance. And so that's, basically all the money in the world you could imagine. And so this guy, has been playing all these games for years, knows all this 80s trivia, and so he puts it to the test to try to beat these challenges. So you're kind of going along with him, completing these challenges, trying to figure out these references. He has to play a perfect game of Pac-Man, which my husband and I, we're not very good. He's better at Pac-Man than me, but we have a little Miss Pac-Man table. And yeah, there's actually like famously people who have beat the whole game, like Billy Mitchell. But yeah, it's a really, the guy has a lot of talent in this book if you've played the games to see them actually, succeed in that way. So that was really fun. I liked the second book, just not as much, but it was, also fun. But I think if you like anything to do with like, I don't know, virtual reality or just 80s in general, I think you'd really like this. Fun fact, I found out that Ernest Cline also collects arcade games. It would be hilarious if we ended up meeting him one day at like an arcade expo, but that would be awesome. More recently, I've been trying to read some older sci-fi and see how I like it. And I think the most successful of that has been reading Orson Scott Card, which many people know Ender's Game. I don't actually think we have a copy of it, but I really liked Ender's Game. I read it when I was younger, I think for school, but then I started reading the rest of the books, and I actually acquired more of them, but they're not on the shelves yet. Imagine Ender's Game right here. But yeah, Ender's Game is about basically a child who has been drafted into this child army that they're trying to fight these insectoid aliens who are posing a threat to Earth. And so they are going through training to be able to battle these aliens. And they have they've surveyed the world for the smartest kids to be able to combat this alien threat. And Ender's Game is really good. But then when I started reading more, my favorite ended up being Speaker for the Dead. I think they were both 5 stars, but like, I don't know, this is after the settings of the first book, after the war has been concluded. I won't spoil how, but this is now kind of the aftermath of this character who was, as a child, put into this war, and now what is his outlook on, different alien species and our universe, and, kind of, questions about, right and wrong. And so I think that, I've also read the rest of the series. It just keeps going. And then there's also a parallel series called the Shadow series, which follows a different young boy from the same timeline perspective, named Bean. So yeah, I think that this is just a fun series. It's also pretty classic. But yeah, Speaker for the Dead. If you've read Ender's Game and you haven't read anything more, at least read Speaker for the Dead. The other ones are also good, but this one is the best. So I highly recommend. For some other classic sci-fi that I've been trying to read, I've been making my way. Oh no. I've been making my way through the Isaac Asimov series. I'm not going to take Foundation down, but it's up there. But I'm a roboticist, right? So I love robots, and I definitely think that this robot series is my favorite of Asimov so far. I've only read through Naked Sun, so I still have to read The Robots of Dawn, but I'm waiting for the audiobook. It just became available. But yeah, I read iRobot in high school, and I really liked it. Also love the movie, but I think, I forget if it's printed right at the beginning, but, it creates the laws of robotics that people are very familiar with, which I'm not finding it, but it's basically a robot shouldn't harm a human. A robot should listen to a human's instructions as long as it doesn't conflict with harming a human. And then, I always forget the third one. Why did I think it was printed right at the beginning? But, wow, I'm a bad roboticist. I can't even remember. I literally just got my PhD. I filmed my last video, like, in the spring when I was finishing my doctorate, and I was so stressed that I wanted to do something completely different than what I was doing. I just needed, like, the polar opposite, so instead of, like, working on my robotics stuff, I was just reading ferociously, and then I wanted to start a booktube, so I did. So I made the first video, and then I just kept it because I didn't want to like start actually having to feel like pressure of posting or anything. So now I actually have my PhD, which my lovely mother-in-law gave me this candle, now hotter by 1 degree. Now I have 3 degrees, which is crazy. But yeah, but I can't remember the laws of robotics. Look at me. But I will put them somewhere over here. For some reason, my husband and I just decided that we just wanted to collect Asimov books because, like, there's so many of them. He's so prolific. He wrote like 300, 400 books. And so we tried to collect his weird ones, but I've been trying to read more of his, actual science fiction. And I'm like 2 books into the Foundation series, and I don't think that one's for me, but I'm going to keep reading it because I feel like I have to, but then it feels like homework. But I have been enjoying the robot books. And then I also read Robot Visions. And I started reading, I read Robot Visions, and I started reading more of like his short stories. And I like his short stories a little bit more, I think, because it's, quicker ideas. And I know that like he started off, writing, these shorter stories and becoming, published in smaller sci-fi magazines. And I really think that some of his strengths really shine there just because I think his ideas are so profound. And with that shorter amount of time, it's kind of just the meat that you care about. And the longer ones are just not hitting as hard for me. So I don't know. Maybe I just need to read more. If you have any suggestions of your favorite Asimov or more classic sci-fi, I'd love to hear it because I'm always looking for more to read. But yeah, I've been enjoying his robot series and his like more smaller short stories. So another set of kind of books I remember fondly are ones that I read in high school that were science fiction that kind of introduced me to the genre. So I'll bring out a couple. So everywhere I've been trying to do research so I can start my like deep dive of sci-fi. And every time I look at like what is the first sci-fi, there's a lot of debate. But I'm gonna do a whole video on it. But just, a popular one is Frankenstein. And so I remember reading this in high school and I really liked it. And I just reread it and I still really like it. And for me, I think my husband and I, we tend to shelve things like this that are sci-fi, but more could be horror or like more, it feels like, anything like witches, vampires, werewolves sort of vibes. Even if it could be sci-fi, we put them in horror. So it's in horror, but it is technically also sci-fi because you have, this a scientist who's, playing with death and trying to create this creature out of, undead parts. And resurrecting them. And so very science-based, right? But I usually think of science fiction very spacey, but that I think is just my, I do space robotics and that's my passion. And so I lean towards those. But yeah, I read this in high school, just reread it, really like it. But another of like a more classic one is H.G. Wells. My favorite one that I read when I was younger was The Time Machine. I realized recently that like I have very distinct visions of what the kind of creatures look like in this book. And I have to reread this because I don't know if they're correct. Because I was watching the movie with my husband and I was like, that's not how I imagined things. So I don't know if my brain just hard remembered something in a weird way. But I've been trying to read more of his books. So I got this anthology. But I haven't read all of them yet. But I love The Time Machine. And yeah, I need to read more of him because definitely very interesting ideas. I also have War of the Worlds. I read that one too. I liked it. But Time Machine's definitely still my favorite. Another series I've really liked recently that's a little newer, and again, more robots, is Murderbot by Martha Wells. I've read all of them. My husband's read the first 4. My favorite out of the series is 5. I think probably because it's a bigger book and I like the story is a little like, or like that standalone story is very fleshed out. But Murderbot's basically about this robot sort of for hire that, all of these companies rent out and use these robots for missions. So this one's like a beefy, like very equipped, like weaponly equipped robot to help, different space missions if they need muscle, right? Instead of like hiring, like a weapons expert. This is the weapons expert, but they're supposed to be just, regular robots without any, sentience. But this robot starts to have, their own perspectives and feelings. And it's really interesting to watch this kind of, this new being emerge and figure out, do they like what they do? Why are they, doing it? Can they do something else? And stuff like that. And then each story, they're kind of shorter books and each one is a different mission. And along the way, they come into themselves a little bit more. And some of the characters are really fun. I think Network Effect is my favorite because it also has another AI that I think is really funny. And I like when they're like playing off of each other, these two like, artificial intelligences that have their own personalities and they're very funny, and kind of watching them cohabitate is really interesting. Like share a ship. And so I liked that. But all the series is really good. And I heard they're making a show of it with, if I'm not wrong, I think it's like Andrew Skarsgård, who I only know because he's in True Blood. And I can't wait. He's going to be so good. Like, he's such a great actor. And I think, like, I don't know, he's not what I imagined in my brain for Murderbot, but I feel like they'll do a good job. I don't know. I think it's by Apple, and they make For All Mankind, and that is a phenomenal sci-fi show about what if the USSR landed on the moon before the US, and how would that have changed our trajectory of spaceflight, because it would have to up the competition from just landing on the moon once and just, saying, oh, that's good enough, and never doing it again, and NASA losing all of its money. So yeah, anyways, I hope they do a good job because this is such a great series and I feel like more people should read it. Another series I really like, but unfortunately I don't actually own any of the books, so I'll put some photos up, is the Three Body Problem series by Cixin Liu, if I said that correctly. But I read the first one, liked it, but the second one, called The Dark Forest, is phenomenal. Basically, it's a series about, again, how do humans react to the presence of a extraterrestrial, and kind of the bigger impacts of how the world would react to knowing there's another sentient, species in the cosmos, and how close they might be, and how do you know if you're safe from them, if they're safe from you, if just the presence of knowing that they're there and if they know where you are, does that pose a threat? And it kind of deals with these, kind of big existential questions. And so there's three books in the series, but yeah, the second one is my favorite. But overall, they're really a good read. They're pretty chunky, but I think they're worth it. Also, it was interesting to read I think a lot of the authors I read tend to be from the US, just the ones I end up finding, but this one was written by someone from China, which is interesting, so different worldviews, going into it, and I think I read might be some controversy with the author, but in general I feel like, I'm trying to find the books used, so I won't be supporting them in any way, but I feel like just looking at how other people think about the world and think about the universe is really interesting. And so I think I'd like to try to read more sci-fi from different cultures to get an idea of, what ideas are out there. So anyways, that series is good. So I've been trying to read more short stories, and I don't have the actual short story I want to talk about here, but Ray Bradbury, my favorite short story of his is A Sound of Thunder. It was literally, I have the Martian Chronicles here because this is the one we have, but it was like, I read this whole other book by him about carnivals. I forget the name. Something Wicked This Way Comes. I read that book, or listened to the audiobook, and I was like, okay, cool. But then at the end of the audiobook, they had A Sound of Thunder, his short story, about basically the genesis of the butterfly effect. If you went back in time and changed something, how could that affect the world? And it was so short and so impactful. And I was like, wow, I listened to this whole book, and then I listened to the short story, and the short story, stays in my brain. This other book, completely out of my brain. So I was like, I should read more sci-fi short stories. And so I got recommended to me Ted Chiang, and I have this book here. It's Stories of Your Life and Others, but the first set of short stories I read by him was called Exhalation, and that one is my favorite, but I haven't gotten the actual copy yet. This one's also good. It has, if you ever seen the movie Arrival, where they're kind of like having an alien species come to Earth and figure out how to communicate with them, that's based on a short story in this collection, the main short story with the title. But the other series, Exhalation, had some really really good short stories in it. And my favorite one, I just forget the name, but I'll put it up here, is about what if you had these kind of sentient pets in, that people could have digitally and form relationships with, and kind of marketing them as like a toy to people, this digital pet. But then what are the ramifications if that pet, is, alive, so to say, digitally at least, and, you should treat it with the same respect you would a regular pet, right? And the same care and affection, but, this society, doesn't have the same, it's a newer emerging, being, and figuring out how to deal with that. And that was such a good story. So yeah, I've been enjoying reading more short stories. I definitely think sometimes the collections can be hit or miss. Like you might have a couple you're like, yeah, these are so good, and then some that I can't even tell you what they're about if you asked me with a gun to my head. So I think, but it's kind of a nice way. I would definitely recommend Ted Chiang, either this A Story of Your Life and Others or Exhalation, if you just want to try out some fun sci-fi concepts. And they're easy to read through. You can split them up really nicely because you can get through a short story and feel accomplished. So yeah, highly recommend. To wrap this up, again, I love space books, so I'm gonna put some that are like space Martian themed. And I'll start off with The Martian by Andy Weir. I read this book. I remember loving how much, science was in it and how it felt very true to, I have a lot of friends who, I work on space robotics, but I have other friends who work in the larger, space community. I have a friend who works on console at JSC, Johnson Space Center, for the International Space Station. And so, I am like a huge nerd. I'd love to be an astronaut, about like what it's really like, what are the experiences like. So I think all of the like little nuggets of reality in this book about how this guy ends up stranded on Mars. Obviously we haven't gone to Mars yet, but I think that, it's really cool to see these real life things weaved in. The only like glaring thing that wasn't really real was that the reason he gets stranded, a little bit of a spoiler, but it happens very quickly in the book, is that there's like this big dust storm. And there are dust storms on Mars, but like they wouldn't do exactly what they did in this book, at least from what I've researched. But overall, this is like a phenomenal read. If you want to like, it's, it's sci-fi, but it's also, very science, they're like nonfiction kind of nuggets of knowledge. And so I think it's really fun. I highly recommend it. I think that a nice companion to it, and actually, it's not science fiction, it's a nonfiction book, but it's called Packing for Mars. And this is by Mary Roach. And the whole idea of this book is kind of delving into weird things about space travel that like most people wouldn't look into, kind of like the more psychological aspect of, like what are astronauts put through? How are they measured, looked at, analyzed by people in the space program? And like really just weird things about space travel. And I had so much fun reading this. And I think that like if you liked The Martian and you want more science fact, this is definitely, it's not sci-fi, but I highly recommend it because it's just fantastic. It's so funny. It's so random. And it has these beautiful little notes at the bottom of pages with like extra facts, and they're just all gems. So I love this book. And then lastly, I thought I would end this with, for some reason I already have this book. I usually try to buy books that I've read because I listen to the audiobooks, and then I only want to keep books that I want to have in my collection for like my husband to read or our kids to read way in the future where we eventually have them. But Hail Mary is my most anticipated sci-fi read of the year. Unfortunately, I have the physical book. We actually have two of them because I don't know how. I think someone gave it to us. But my friend Holly told me that the audiobook is fantastic. And again, I can't read this physically. It'll take me, my husband really likes Snow Crash. It's all the way up there. I'm not gonna get it. I read that book. They're about the same size. That took me almost a year to read. I don't want to take a year to read this because I feel like it's gonna, because I physically read Snow Crash because I couldn't find an audiobook. And I can't find an audiobook for this. So I don't know what I'm going to do, but apparently also the audiobook is phenomenal. So I need to find it somehow because I've heard it's really good. It's also by Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian. It's called Hail Mary. And I heard it's another astronaut kind of day in the life account. And I'm excited. So I don't know much about it, but I am really trying to read this. Because I know like The Martian was so good. I heard from a friend that the second, like the Artemis book he wrote, Andy Weir wrote, was not very good, so I'm not even going to read it because apparently she told me that like he was trying to write a woman and it was excruciating to read, and I don't need more misogyny in my life. I don't want to read it, so I'm not going to. But I will read this one because I heard it's really good. So yeah, this is my highest anticipated read of the year. I'm excited. I need to read it, but I guess if all hell breaks loose, I'll physically read it, and it'll take me a long time. But anyways, I am glad that I got to kind of hopefully give you guys an idea of what kind of sci-fi I like reading, so that, if you're, if you haven't read some of these, give them a shot because I love them. Hopefully, as I post more, you'll like understand kind of my reading taste and might have a better idea if a book's for you or not based on if I liked it. But I think for now, like, yeah, any of those I would buy for my dad. So I think you should read them. But yeah, I definitely think that all of these are like really solid, like 5 stars for me. Some of the series, you know, the ones that I said were my favorites are the 5 stars, and the other ones are like 4 stars. Solid though. So I'd highly recommend them. But I'd love if you guys have recommendations, or if there's something that I did not put on this list that you're like, how have you not read this? It's probably because I haven't read it, and I'd love to read it. And so I'd love you, yeah, if you guys have recommendations of your favorite sci-fi, please put them in the comments so that I can, you know, get new gems to read. But yeah, it was fun going through my favorite sci-fi. And I hope you catch me next time on my next video. This is Retro Reads. Bye!